Yes! What's up, everyone? Welcome to Lowered Expectations. Thanks for lowering your expectations and hanging out with me here. I do appreciate it. In today's video, we're going to be doing something that I've wanted to do for a very long time, and that is run my diesel heater exhaust through a heat exchanger. In particular, we're going to be using a copper aluminum heat exchanger because, contrary to what a lot of people believe, it's far superior to cast iron, it's far superior to a sand battery, and this is going to give us the best results. In a previous video, I did run the heater exhaust through a tub of water, and by doing that, I learned one, that I wanted to pull all my hair out, and that was quite difficult, and two, that the heater actually loses about 800 watts, which is about this many BTUs. In this video, we're not going to calculate the amount of watts or BTUs. We're going to try to calculate in some way the efficiency or how much heat energy we can actually scavenge. How we're going to do that, we're going to measure the temperature going into the heat exchanger, the temperature coming out of the heat exchanger, and the temperature of the air. The temperature that is going out of the heat exchanger is basically lost. So the temperature that goes outside of the tent that I'll be testing in will just be lost to the atmosphere, and we want to recuperate as much heat as possible. I apologize for sometimes using temperature and heat energy interchangeably. I am aware that they are different things, but I've used the terms wrong in previous videos, and I'm sure I'll do it again in the future. It's just a slip. Temperature is a result of an object storing heat energy, so they are not the same thing at all. If you clicked on this video, I do appreciate it very much, or perhaps you just didn't see how long this video is. It is going to be a long one because there's a lot to go through. I'm going to miss stuff as long as this video is. I am going to miss a bunch of things, but I'm going to try to clear up some misconceptions. We're going to try to go over some details, and I'm going to try to do it in a way that it's not a lecture. We're going to do actual experiments, and I'm going to try to demonstrate certain things to you guys. So thanks for sticking with me, and I hope you longtime viewers and subscribers enjoyed that intro. Before we get into this test, I want to say that this isn't necessarily practical. I have about $400 invested into the test for you guys. You're welcome. Not including my carbon monoxide detector, which we will be using to see if we're getting a complete burn. The exchanger is going to cause a restriction on the exhaust, and so that is definitely a concern. And then also, these were very cheap, but test strips to check the pH. So I'm not concerned terribly about the pH being so strong that it's going to kill the grass or pets or whatever. I know some of you are. I'm more concerned about the acidity of the exhaust gases actually eating away at the exchanger. So we're going to be testing that. But anyway, what I was saying is that I've got quite a bit of money invested in this. The heat exchanger is about $200. The fan is about $200. Of course, you could get a cheaper one. But this test is basically to show you guys how much you can gather from the exhaust or scavenge from the exhaust. Maybe this test is going to fail altogether. The inlet and outlet ports on this exchanger are 1 inch, but quite conveniently, the exhaust on the diesel heater fits perfectly, absolutely perfectly, over a 3/4 inch fitting. So I've actually necked it down to 3/4 inches in and out so that we can get the exhaust in and out. Anyway, I'm blabbering on now. Let's just go and fire up the heater. This is the ice fishing tent where I'm going to be doing my testing. And the exhaust is going to be entering, or exiting rather, over here. Hopefully you guys can see that. Okay, this is the setup. And as you guys can see, there is a piece of exhaust pipe coming out of the diesel heater. It loops around, goes into one side of the heat exchanger. I have a thermocouple on there so I can check the inlet temperature. And then it goes through the heat exchanger, out on this pipe here, and then out through the side of the tent. This fits on here very snug, and I actually don't have a hose clamp on there, so I can pull this off and we can actually collect some water to check the pH. The Viver fan sits on top of it, and I have it sealed up with duct tape, so it's not sealed perfectly well, but yeah, sealed up with duct tape. And this is the controller. So it is currently 4 degrees inside of the ice fishing shelter, 61% humidity. We will be turning this on shortly, but first what we're going to do is fire the heater up and we'll see how hot the exchanger gets. Some people were concerned about these solder joints failing, so what I'm actually going to do is let it run for quite a while without actually running a fan, and we'll see if this gets anywhere near temperature where it would cause the solder joint to fail. By the way, this test is starting at 3:53. We'll call it 4 o'clock basically. And so I've just fired the heater up. It's not actually making any heat. While it's sitting there warming up, I am going to run and get some diesel fuel because I'm almost out. It is now about 10 minutes later. It is 4:10 p.m. The temperature inside the tent is now 20 degrees Celsius, so it's climbing up quite quickly. I've got a thermocouple on the inlet of the exhaust so we can check the temperature there. I'm going to go grab a second thermocouple and my multimeter, and that way we can monitor the temperature here. The heater has now been running for about 20 minutes. I'm going to check the carbon monoxide, and that will tell us how clean or how dirty this is actually burning. I'm sure if we see soot coming out in the water or the condensate, that will also give us some idea, but anywhere up to about 50 parts per million is acceptable. 100 parts per million probably means that the heater is going to get plugged up fairly quickly. These things normally run between 14 parts per million and say 20 parts per million. So I'm going to pan the camera over, pull the exhaust off. I don't think I should have to say this, but I'm going to say this anyway. I have a monitor and I'm quite aware that this is going to be releasing carbon monoxide into the tent where I am. Don't run your heater like this. This is for an experiment and I am being cautious. I'm not going to spend a lot of time in the tent, and I'm not at all concerned about it. But yeah, don't run your diesel heater exhaust into your living space or your breathing space, whatever. So let's take a look and see what the actual carbon monoxide levels are. I guess first of all, what we should do is check the temperature coming out. Okay, so that's quite promising because the temperature on the outlet after running for a little over 20 minutes is 38 Celsius, which is 100 Fahrenheit. Where is the light? That's not the light we want. There we go. So 100 Fahrenheit, 38 Celsius on the temperature coming out, and I was kind of aware of that because I can touch this without burning myself. So now let's pull the exhaust pipe off, and we'll see. Oh, there's some water. Oh, that I should have collected that. Before we collect that condensate, there will be plenty more where that came from. I've actually brought out a glass of water. We are going to test the pH because I don't think a lot of people understand the pH scale. Drinking water or tap water is probably going to be around 7 on the pH scale, which is fairly neutral. The lower you go, the more acidic it is, and the higher you go, the more base it is. So we are at 38 Celsius on the outlet. We're now going to check the inlet, which is kind of clumsy because I actually have to plug in my leads to check the other sensor. I only have an actual plug on one. Inlet temperature to the heat exchanger is 259 Fahrenheit or 126 Celsius. So that's a pretty big difference between the inlet and the outlet. But we still are pumping basically 40 degrees Celsius or 100 Fahrenheit air outside. So soon, after about an hour, we're going to actually turn the fan on and see how much more of that air we can, or heat we can scavenge. The carbon monoxide detector isn't detecting anything yet, which means this isn't pumping out a whole lot, or this would be jumping up. But we're going to hold this directly in front of the exhaust and see what it reads. By the way, I did a review on Viver unit, and some of you might be wondering why I'm using this. Even though I do have an affiliation with Viver and I promoted that product, this is actually a better unit. I can't go back and undo that video, but I've been using them both for quite a while now. And you can purchase these on Amazon. A lot of people talk a lot of trash about these. I think it's fun and exciting for people to say that there's a lot of fakes out there. Mine is real, and they are very inexpensive, which is, I think, part of the reason why people think that they're fake. I got this on Amazon. No, I'm not leaving a link for it. Go find one that looks like this and test yours to make sure that it actually works before you before you trust your life on it. But anyway, I'll shut up now. No, I won't. And put this underneath the exhaust. We are jumping up fairly quickly. 22 parts per million. 25. Okay. So that's actually very reasonable. Between 24 and 26 parts per million is extremely reasonable. I'm not really concerned about that causing causing soot to build up inside of the chamber. If I had a tunable heater, I would try to tune it. In fact, I do have Kush doesn't like me talking to the camera. This has plateau mode on it, and maybe what I'll actually do once we run this for a while is switch it over to plateau mode to lean it out and see if that reduces the carbon monoxide. But for now, we're not going to mess with any of the variables. We're going to leave this run. I'm going to put the exhaust tube back on, partly so that I'm not breathing in exhaust carbon monoxide, and also so that the test stays more consistent. One thing that I would be concerned about if you were actually running your heater this way is that this water is going to be running outside, and there's a possibility that it could freeze in the pipe and block the whole system up. I feel like that was a whole lot of talking, and like the lighting is really poor, but I'm doing what I can here. I'm going to use some of these test strips now to check the pH level of my water. I thought of another fun experiment. I'm gonna go collect some, I don't have rainwater because it's the middle of the winter, but I do have some snow sitting outside. So I'm gonna go scoop up a cup full of snow, melt it out, or melt it, and then we'll check the pH level of that. By the way, the current temperature in here is 23 degrees Celsius, which is something Fahrenheit. It's like 70 Fahrenheit or something like that. We've got the strips here, and we've got the corresponding colors on the card. So we're looking for kind of the greenish yellow, which would be around a pH of 7 or 8. We might have to go in the house to get better footage of this. Okay, let's be honest, I gave up on this video being short a long time ago, so I'm going to take this opportunity to give you guys a bit of a sales pitch on the heat exchanger and Viver fan, but I'm also going to throw in some bonus talking about some of my other projects that I'm working on, so if you're interested in that, stick around. Most of you will know that I am affiliated with Viver. They did send me the heater that I'm using in this video, but we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the heat exchanger and the fan, which I did purchase with my own money. That being said, affiliate links in the description below. If you use them, I get a small kickback, and that helps me out. So thanks. The heat exchanger, awesome price. I actually purchased two of them. I have an 18x20 that's heating my house, and I have a 16x16 that we're using in this test to extract the heat from the exhaust. They are really good price. They are really good quality. They come packaged well. So if you're interested, do some research, check other places, but I'm sure you'll find that Viver is very competitive with the price. They have great shipping, and yeah, sure you'll be happy. The fan is quite a bit more fancy than the average person is going to need. If you're pulling exhaust fumes out of your garage, probably not going to need this. It's intended for greenhouses. It has a humidity sensor as well as a temperature probe. They're actually built into the same thing. And yeah, the controller has a bunch of different settings. I'm definitely not using all of its potential here. The reason why I got it is because I was going to use the temperature probe to check temperature of the water and turn the fan on. And while I could do that, it's definitely not necessary. I do like the fact that it has a bunch of different settings on it so I can conserve electrical power. And it is very quiet, and it seems to be built extremely well. So again, if you're interested in any of those products, links in the description below. Let's take a look at a few things that I've been playing with. If you take a look in the background, I'm not going to talk about it specifically, but if you keep an eye in the background, you will see something. Some of you will know what it is. And my Patreon viewers will know exactly what it is because I've been talking about it over there. Huge shout out to D for being my latest Patreon member. Thank you. I do appreciate that. And if you guys are interested, link to that also in the description below. Now, let's take a look. The camera is actually sitting on a steel drum. So I ended up purchasing two steel drums to shield, insulate, protect, whatever you want to call it, my heater. The heater, or the oil burner, is actually sitting underneath this black drum. It's going to keep some heat in, and it's also going to stop flames from shooting out if things go wrong. So it's going to protect my house and my yard, property, whatever. And it's also going to keep a bit of heat in. The reason why I got a second one is I might create a skin around the first one with a insulation layer, and this drum would just be to protect that insulation layer, but haven't decided exactly. Give you guys a sneak peek of my new fuel pump system. This might not be exciting to some of you, but fuel delivery is one of the biggest problems with the automated system or semi-automated system that burns waste oil. Lots of people do just use drip feed, and yeah, I don't feel comfortable leaving something like that run while I'm sleeping. So this is what I've come up with. I'm not going to explain it in great detail. I've got an electric fuel pump. This is the inlet. It goes through two filters, through the fuel pump, to this T, and then this will go into the burner. This ball valve here basically restricts flow from going back through the loop. So we've got pressure coming out here, and it tees off. The more I close this valve, the more fuel it forces out this way. That is the explanation that you get on that. I've also got a stainless steel dish. A bunch of you recommended that I use a stainless dish. I was going to show you that, but it's underneath the drum, and I'm in a bit of a time crunch to get this clip recorded and edit the video, so anyway, I'm using a stainless steel dish. A bunch of you will be happy to know that. And so now let's get back to the video. Here we are inside because the lighting outside is too poor. So we can see with the first strip, we are somewhere around, I would say, an 8. Try to get some clean stuff. Not sure how well that's gonna work. All right, let's go melt this. Well, I just realized something fun. I have this jar of battery acid, and I also have pH down. Extremely corrosive. So I'm gonna pour a little drop of this out. We're gonna test the battery acid, we're gonna test this, and see what they measure. We've got a little drop of the pH down, which is extremely corrosive. So let's see what color this changes. It should be something reddy orangey. And in fact it is. So we know our pH strips work. If we compare that over there, you can see it's about a 2. So that's quite acidic. And if we take this other strip, I'm really curious about this because this is battery acid. I've tried to dehydrate it a bit, but this is basically just battery acid out of a battery. And it is also, it's perhaps even a little darker. It might be a 1. Yeah, I'm gonna say that's a 1. It's between 1 and 2. Well, I think absolutely nobody was surprised at that, but battery acid is in fact acidic, and so is this stuff. However, I don't recommend doing this, but people think that you get acid on your skin and it's going to like immediately eat through you. If you work in an office every day and have never picked up a wrench, I still don't even see it irritating your fingertips like this. If you put it on the back of your hand, I'm actually going to do this. I don't recommend you do it, but put it on the back of your hand like something like that, and it might cause a bit of irritation at some point, but you can see it's not dissolving me away. And to prove that this is the stuff that is that I tested on the strip, I'm going to touch my finger on the strip, and you can see immediately it turns red in the back of my hand. Yeah, so this is acid, but it's not like in the movies. It's not going to dissolve me away. There are acids that will do this, but a pH of 1 and this type of acid, not really much to worry about. As you can see, my hand is not melting away or even sizzling. In the time it took me to do the acid test, run and get a cookie and a vitamin C packet thing, the snow water, is that a thing? The snow has melted into water, and so we're now going to do a pH test on this. And then I've got one of these emergency packets, emergency vitamin C packet things. We're going to check the acidity level. I'm going to pour this in there and waste one of these for science. I don't know that you can call this science, but let's check the pH level of this snow water that came from in front of my house. Let's see if all the diesel heater testing and waste oil burner testing has caused acid snow or acid rain to fall in front of my house. It looks fairly greenish. It looks maybe a bit more acidic than the tap water. So we're gonna leave that sit for a minute. Try not to put it anywhere where there was acid. And then what I'm gonna do off camera, I'm gonna open this up, pour it in here, and then we're gonna test it that way. Freshly opened packet. No trickery here, folks. All right. Fizzing away. I suspect that this is going to be somewhere around 6 or so. And I don't know what I'm basing that on, just a hunch. Ooh, It looks like it's actually going to be quite acidic, that stuff. All right, strip number 2. We'll actually wait a couple minutes. I'll come back and dip this one in. Make sure we're fully dissolved. We are coming up on an hour that the heater has been running, so let's do this test fairly quickly. I'm going to check the pH from the snow water. And as you guys can see, it looks like we're right around a 7. Yeah, it looks like we're a 6 on the snow water. We're going to call that 6. The strips that we put into the emergency water stuff looks like it's about a 4, I would say, between a 3 and a 4. I don't know what you guys think. But yeah, both of the strips look to be about the same. All right, folks, an hour has passed since I turned on the heater. It is 4:56, so around an hour. We are now going to check the temperature of the exchanger inlet and outlet. I'm going to try to collect some water. We're going to recheck the carbon monoxide. The temperature in here is about 21 Celsius. I've had the flap on the tent open, partly open. The first thing I'm going to check here is the temperature for the inlet. Okay, so we're not going up any higher than this, and we're not near the solder melting point. I can say quite confidently that even if your fan shuts off, it's not going to melt the solder. It's not going to melt the silver solder that actually holds the exchanger together. 123 Celsius, 253 Fahrenheit. So that's, yeah, my solder joints, I'm definitely not worried about them. So let's check the outlet temperature now and see if it has gone up. The last time we checked it, it was 38 Celsius, about 100 Fahrenheit. All right, so the outlet temperature is up to 44 Celsius, 111 Fahrenheit. We don't want to be running the fan on high if we don't need it on high, but we want to make sure that we strip as much heat out of the exhaust as possible to get as much efficiency as possible. Okay, so I'm going to pull this off. We're going to try to collect some of this condensate. Hopefully we got some coming out. There we go. And yes, I did wash and dry this glass so that we're not messing with the results. I don't know if you guys can see that, but we're at 25 to 27 parts per million. So again, you wouldn't want to be breathing that in all day, but if you're piping it outside, not too much of a concern. So what we're going to do now, we're going to test the pH of the condensate that I just checked. Then we'll come back and we're going to check the temperature drop once I turn the fan on. This is the part of the test that I am most interested in and most excited about. I've had discussions with people in comments of many of my videos and on some other people's videos about using a cast iron heat exchanger versus one of these, and my argument is that these are way more efficient, way more effective. So we can already see the heat there, the exhaust is going in at 124, I forget what it was, 250 some Fahrenheit, and it's coming out at about 100 Fahrenheit. You can see I can actually hold my hand on here. I definitely could not. I definitely can't hold my hand on there. That would boil water. So yeah, it's working quite well. We're gonna find out what happens when I turn the fan on, but first, pH test. I'm gonna go in the house to do that so you guys can actually see it. Let's give this a go. We've got our exhaust condensate in 2 test strips. Well, that's a good sign. I expected it to maybe turn red right away. That doesn't look too bad at all. Let's do 2, just to stick with the program. I wasn't happy with the fact that I laid these on the counter. I had put these 2 strips on the counter, and I thought people would say that maybe there was something base or acidic on the counter. So these are the old ones from testing the water out of the tap. These are the ones that I had on the counter, and I did a 3rd one so that I could hold it in my hand and not skew the results. So it looks like Florence is in the way. What pH is the kitty? It looks like, by my calculations, we are about a 6 on the pH scale. We're definitely not a 7. Let's see if I can get that in there. Yeah, definitely not a 7, which is neutral, but we're definitely not a 5 either. This is lighter than the 5. So we're about a 6. So that's not bad at all. Exhaust condensate. But the question now is, when we start pulling heat out of the exhaust, is it going to cause the acidity levels to get worse? So let's go find out. The next part of this test is the most exciting for me anyway, and that's where we find out how efficiently we can actually pull heat out of the exhaust. Keep in mind that if the air temperature in the tent is, say, 18 degrees Celsius, we can't possibly cool the exhaust off more than 18 degrees, or to more than 18 degrees Celsius. If the air in the tent is 24, which it is right now, we can't cool the exhaust off below 24 without using something like evaporative cooling. A lot of people don't seem to understand temperature and heat energy and that sort of thing. But basically, if the air in here is 24 degrees Celsius and the heat exchanger is 24, there's no heat transfer. If the heat exchanger is 18 degrees Celsius and the air temperature is 24, the fan is actually going to warm up the heat exchanger, not cool it off. So we actually get more efficiency if the air is cooler, but what we're trying to find out here, how close to tent temperature can we get the exhaust temperature? I'm going to shut up for a little while. I'm going to turn the fan up all the way. It has 10 settings, so I'm going to crank it up all the way. It is currently 5:13 p.m. Okay, it's going to get a little bit noisy. This fan is quite energetic at 10. We're already down to 27, and it's only been 5:15 and we're already down to 27. The temperature in here is 25. So yeah, pretty impressive. It is literally a couple of minutes, 5:17 p.m. and the temperature is already 23, 22 Celsius, 72 Fahrenheit. So obviously this exchanger is working very efficiently. That fan is insanely loud, so let's slow it down. Let's not take baby steps and increment this. A little side note here, I said in an earlier clip that the temperature of the exhaust couldn't go below the temperature of the ambient air, and I then said that the ambient air was 24 Celsius. Well, I should have been more clear on that. The temperature sensor for the ambient air for the fan is directly above the heater. I'll try to point it out for you guys without knocking anything over. Let's see here. The sensor is hanging from the lamp here. So this is the sensor and the heater is right there. So hopefully it's obvious that it's going to be a little bit warmer there than it is everywhere else in the tent. And when the fan starts circulating air, it's going to pick up air from the cooler spots. And so if we leave this run, which we are going to, it could possibly be 20-degree exhaust coming out of the heater, which would be, I don't know what in Fahrenheit, but yeah, it could possibly circulate ambient air enough that it pulls the temperature of the exhaust down to 20 degrees or something like that. So we're not breaking any laws of physics or anything like that, and what I said still stands true. The exhaust air can't be any cooler than the temperature of the air that is being blown over the exchanger. It is now about another hour later. It's around 6 p.m. and the temperature has stabilized. The outlet temperature of the heater, or the exchanger rather, is 26 Celsius. Although that has gone up a couple degrees, so has the air temperature inside of the tent. And as I mentioned earlier, the exchanger is never going to cool off more than the air flowing over it. That's just not how stuff works. So if I opened up all the doors and windows in here and we cooled the air off, we could cool down the exhaust, but that just wouldn't be logical. The exhaust, I pulled the pipe off and measured the carbon monoxide, and I'm actually shocked. I thought it was going to be much higher now that we're pulling heat out of it, but it appears it is actually between, I checked it earlier off camera and it was about 20. Now we're between 18 and 20 parts per million, which is really impressive. That means that running through this system isn't going to cause any kind of sooting or carbon issues inside of the burn chamber. I mean, try it at your own risk, of course, but yeah, I don't foresee any problems. I've run these heaters up over 30 parts per million and still not had any serious issues. I think probably around 50 is where you're going to have some problems. But yeah, 20 degrees, 26 degrees Celsius coming out of the exhaust now, with a room temperature of 25, with the fan set all the way to low. So realistically, there's no good reason to crank the fan speed up. And at this speed, we're getting good efficiency, we're not using a lot of electricity, and the carbon monoxide is reasonable. I'm trying to collect some condensate in the glass here, but there's nothing coming out, so I'm going to shut the camera off and wait for some to drip in there. We'll recheck the pH on that. And BJ pointed out a few minutes ago that bananas are around a pH of 5, so if the water coming out of here is a 4 or a 5 and a cat happens to take a little sip of it, which I don't think is very likely to happen, seeing as it's going to absorb into the ground or freeze, but if that happened, there's not going to be any harm in it, at least not from the acidity. I still wouldn't recommend drinking it. As you guys saw, it was quite clear in that glass, but there's probably all sorts of diesel particulates and yeah, probably copper and lead and whatever there is from running through the heat exchanger, but as far as acidity, not a problem. I just thought of something interesting, or something that I think is interesting. I've been trying to collect water or condensate out of the heat exchanger now for a little while and couldn't really figure out why there's no water dripping out, and then I remembered something. When I started doing this test, I hope that I showed you guys the controller for the fan, because it has not only temperature on there, but it also has the percentage of humidity. Basically, the humidity now inside of the tent that it has warmed up, the humidity has dropped all the way to 29. When this thing starts up cold and there's a lot of humidity in here, it's going to condense a lot of that through the heat exchanger. But now the percentage of humidity has dropped all the way down to 29, which is actually a little bit low. I think comfortable is around 50. That's what I try to keep it in my house. And so there's actually a lot less moisture going into the heater. Well, that is very interesting. I've had so many people tell me more air, less fuel, runs lean, it's gonna run clean. I just out of curiosity put my heater into plateau mode, which is high elevation mode. It cuts the fuel, and the exhaust all of a sudden went from pretty good to scary. Holding it in front of the pipe, we'll see if we can get it to alarm. Okay, that is, I'm gonna put the pipe on. I do not want to be breathing that in. And we're gonna take it back off of plateau mode because that is crazy. I might be wrong about this, but I think what's happening is when you put it into plateau mode, it actually isn't burning enough fuel to burn hot enough. And when the flame cools off, it's not burning these burners basically depend on a hot combustion chamber or a hot burn area to actually flash the fuel off to vaporize it so that it burns completely. And if it's not flashing off completely or cleanly, then it's not mixing with the air properly, it's not burning properly, and so this is exactly what happened. Finally, we can test the pH. Let's see, this is the condensate that came out while we were pulling a lot of heat energy out of the exchanger. So let's see if that makes any drastic difference. Kind of guessing that it won't, but I'm going to make sure not to set these down on the counter so we don't ruin the results. I have a strong suspicion that yeah, it's going to be probably around a 6. I've now waited a few minutes and hopefully you guys can see this is somewhere between a 5 and a 6. So definitely not terribly acidic. Again, 5 is around banana level, 7 is neutral. So definitely not dangerous on the pH level. That's the one strip. Let me get the other strip here. Just make sure they're the same. Yeah, as you guys can see, somewhere in between there, around a 5. I would call it a 5. Copper, as far as I know, has pretty good corrosion resistance. Maybe just because it builds up oxides, but yeah, I'm definitely not worried about a pH of 5 damaging the exchanger. Let me know if I should be. While I've got you guys here, the carbon monoxide level has dropped to 0 inside of the tent. I'm going to put this back by the exhaust, and since we have switched to normal mode, away from what's the word? Plateau mode, we are back to normal. We are 24 parts per million on the carbon monoxide, and so that is very reasonable. Don't think that just because you're burning less fuel you're going to make less carbon monoxide. If the flame gets too cold, it's going to burn dirty, and that's going to make more carbon monoxide. So yeah. Before we conclude this video, I wanted to show you guys, I've just opened up the door to the tent and I've got a couple windows open. Window here. Wanted to show you guys that now that the air temperature has gone down, we're at 21 degrees Celsius, and this is now 22 and 72 Fahrenheit. So the air temperature going out of the exhaust is about 1 degree Celsius warmer than the air temperature, and that's going to stay fairly constant or consistent, I think, just because, again, it can't cool it off more than the air temperature. If it's 18 degrees Celsius in here, it can cool it to 18. If it's 30 degrees Celsius in here, it can cool it to 30. The higher the temperature differential between the exchanger and the air temperature, the more efficient the heater is going to be, but that also means lowering the temperature inside of the living space or tent. So I think it just makes sense. Run your fan fairly slow if you have one that's this efficient, and if you don't, well, check your air temperature on the, or exhaust temperature on the outlet, and figure out for yourself how fast you need to run your fan in order to get something close to this efficiency, but it can be done. That just about does it for this one. I hope you guys enjoyed. I've already tried to record this outro a couple of times, but it keeps turning into a huge rant. I'm trying to do a close up on the video and give you guys kind of some final thoughts. I know that this is probably going to cause some heated discussion in the comments section, but hopefully it's put some closure, or yeah, hopefully it's changed some minds about using cast iron or sand batteries. In most cases, you're way better off collecting energy now and doing it really efficiently than you are storing energy for later and losing tons of efficiency. If you're using a cast iron radiator to scavenge your heat, what's going to happen is the heat is going to store, it's going to build up in the cast iron radiator. But when that happens, the cast iron radiator is going to be way less efficient at collecting heat. So for the first little while, you're going to collect heat, but then at a certain point, it's going to heat up. And because it can't get rid of that heat, the temperature differential isn't as high. And so you're dumping a bunch of heat outside. It's not efficient anymore. That's kind of what we saw when I didn't have the fan turned on the copper exchanger. There still was pretty good heat scavenging or energy scavenging. We went from 127 Celsius down to, what was it, 38 Celsius? So that's really good. But by turning the fan on low and lowering the temperature of the exchanger, we were able to create a higher temperature differential and therefore make the exchanger more efficient and gather another, 20 degrees Celsius out of it or something like that. And I know that's not the right way to say it, but hopefully people understand anyway. So there are certain limited situations or circumstances where sand batteries or cast iron is a good idea, specifically because it stores heat. But those situations are very limited, and I think people try to apply it to everything. I think people have these romantic ideas about cast iron and sand batteries and whatnot. Again, there are places where they work well, but I think people apply it to way too many situations. Congratulations if you made it all the way to the end of the video. You are a superstar. This was a long one. Most people don't have enough attention span these days to make it through a full TikTok video. So thank you. I do appreciate every single one of you, every view, every like, every comment. You guys give me a bunch of ideas, and you guys often set me straight on something. Not to spoil anything, but I am playing around with Arduinos because of a bunch of comments from you people, canceled. I'm playing around with Arduinos and having a lot of fun with it and going to put it to practical use. You guys aren't necessarily going to see that in the very near future, but you will see it at some point. This video has turned into a monster. Thank you so much for watching. If I got something wrong, let me know in the comments section. I am definitely not perfect. I don't claim to be. I appreciate all of you. Thank you. See you next time. Hey, could you not chew on that, please? Hey, no. Apparently, this is the never-ending video. I was ready to export, and then I realized that there's something extremely important that I forgot to tell you guys, and that is that I'm actually an incredible actor. Some of you are going to be asking about soot buildup in the heat exchanger, whether I'm worried about it, and others are going to tell me that I need to be worried about it. And I'm here to tell you why this means that I'm a good actor and why I'm not worried about soot building up in the exchanger. The first clips that you saw of this being tested were actually a week into testing. I set the thing all up, Started testing, didn't feel like filming, and also didn't have any pH strips. So I ordered them, did a week's worth of testing, burnt through about 20 liters of fuel, and then I actually started recording. Since the recording, I have burnt through about another 20 liters of fuel, and I've run it since, it's running right now actually, and there has never been any clumps of soot coming out. There's never been any problems. It starts up a little bit stinky, but that settles down pretty quickly and it works really well. An added bonus is that the heat exchanger acts as an excellent muffler. So those of you who are worried about noise at the exhaust, it's kind of an expensive muffler, but it also scavenges heat. So that's why I am, one, a good actor, and two, not worried about soot buildup inside of the exchanger. It is currently Saturday afternoon, the day before the release of this video, and I just had a minor malfunction of the heating system that I need to tell you guys about. These heat exchangers will trap a little bit of moisture, and there's nothing you can do about it. The orientation that I have mine mounted, laying down perfectly level, is the best way to mount it, but it is going to trap a bit of moisture. That moisture is going to freeze if it drops below freezing, and mine has now for 2 weeks been freezing every night. But the water just sits in the bottom of the tubes. It's not enough to actually cause anything to break. What I normally do when I start the heater is turn it on without turning the heat exchanger fan on, and that allows the heat exchanger to warm up. The condensate can then flow through and everything is perfect. However, what I did today, two things were different. One, it's minus 15 degrees Celsius. Two, I turned on the fan immediately. So I had minus 15 degrees Celsius air blowing over the exchanger with ice already in there, and then new condensate being formed and freezing immediately. That caused the heat exchanger to plug up. What happened after that is I basically turned the fan off on the heat exchanger, ran the heater for a while, and it thawed out the condensate and it worked perfectly fine as per usual. I'm mentioning this because, well, if you orient your heat exchanger in the wrong way and it freezes, it could possibly burst the tubes. And if you're not aware of this and you turn your fan on, you could run into the same problem. So hopefully this is the last time I see you guys in this video, because it's getting a bit ridiculous. If there's anyone wondering why a clever, handsome guy like myself is single, this is my bed.